Late at night, in a small town in the Midwest, a traffic violator was waiting to see if he was going to have to kill a law enforcement officer. He knew that when the officer called in for a license check, the officer could find out he was really a parole violator who had to be taken into custody.
303, your suspect is wanted for parole violation.
The man decided that if the officer tried to take him prisoner, he would attack if he could.
I'd like you to step out of the van, please.
The man did attack successfully when the officer gave him the opportunity by not adequately controlling the suspect from a position of safety before attempting an arrest. This is not an unusual case. The fact is that a nationwide study of every law enforcement officer killed while handling prisoners over a 10-year period revealed that many officers are killed during the early stages of an arrest. 27% of the officers killed handling prisoners were killed while controlling the prisoners prior to actually taking them into custody. In this program, you're going to see actual cases that help illustrate some of the main findings of the study. This case from the north illustrates one reason some officers may have died controlling prisoners.
Sir, would you step off the bus, please? What do you mean? I haven't done anything wrong. I just want to talk to you for a minute. Would you step off the bus, please? Sure.
A witness had told the officer that this person was an armed robber who was using the bus to escape. The officer died because he had not used any tactics for controlling a potentially dangerous prisoner, perhaps because he wasn't sure of what he was involved in, and he didn't want to make a scene with so many people around. There were a number of cases like this. In fact, 19% of the officers killed handling prisoners may have misjudged the danger, and most of those died while controlling prisoners. In the Midwest, the officer's tactic for controlling the prisoner was to grab him, shake him, and taunt him for trying to get away. And while he was doing that, the prisoner took his gun and then took his life. Over and over in the study, there were cases like this, where in the emotion of the moment, the officers did use an offensive tactic, but forgot to think of their own defense, especially when initially controlling prisoners.
Well, I'm going to have to go. I just can't. I don't have the time to. I don't have the time,
If you could give me just a minute, I could call the management and we could get another
I just don't have the time.
refrigerator.
The police department in a small town in the east had sent out an announcement that a certain person was passing fraudulent checks. A store clerk encountered that person. She called the police and was now trying to keep the suspect in the store until an officer arrived.
Oh, would you give me my check?
You know, this is my first
Just
week
give me the
here.
check,
It's
please.
really
Give me the
important.
check. I've got to go.
This case helps make the point that officers in the study were killed attempting to handle prisoners for every possible kind of offense, from auto theft to malicious mischief to fraudulent checks. When it comes to handling prisoners, no one type of crime proved to be significantly more dangerous than any other. In other words, it's true. Any prisoner can be dangerous.
Really,
I've got to get
Carson,
out of here. I've got things to do.
I really need
Calm
to.
down, calm down. Can I help you?
Officer.
This case is also an example of another finding of the study that helps explain why many officers had trouble in the past controlling prisoners. Watch.
Me this check for a
That's you.
refrigerator.
What are you talking about?
Okay, could you put your hands on the counter, please?
No. What are you doing? What do you want?
Just put your hands on
I
the
didn't
counter.
do anything.
Just put your hands on the counter.
I'm not going to do it.
Yes, just put your hands right on the counter. Come on.
When the suspect offered initial resistance to the officer's orders, the officer's reaction probably should have been to maintain his distance and his composure. Instead, he became impatient and tried to physically force the suspect to comply. And of course, you know what happened. Like this officer, the study found that 22% of the officers killed handling prisoners may have been too impatient. What happened in a case in the Southwest is an example of another problem the study found that officers had while controlling prisoners. Instead of complying with the officer's order,
Freeze! Freeze right there!
the suspect took off running. In a number of cases, when the officer caught the suspect, he either lost his weapon or the suspect was armed.
Get back! Back!
One way or another, 18% of the officers who died handling prisoners were killed during foot pursuits. The problem with foot pursuits, of course, is that they often end up like this. In the study, in order to catch the suspect, officers often tackled the suspect and then wrestled with him to get control. The problem with that approach, of course, is that sometimes it's the suspect who gets control and the officer's gun. After studying over 800 cases of law enforcement officers who were killed answering a wide variety of calls, from family disputes to burglary alarms to backing up traffic stops, it was found that for almost every type of call, at least some officers were killed because at some point during the call, it evolved into a foot pursuit. The officer may have won the race, but he lost control and his life. It's worth remembering that statistically, foot pursuits are extremely dangerous. Certainly every foot pursuit is different, and different departments have different tactics for dealing with foot pursuits. But the study found that a number of law enforcement officers who were killed during foot pursuits might have avoided losing control if they had employed a very simple tactic that many veteran officers have used for a long time. Instead of grabbing the suspect or tackling him and wrestling with him, the tactic is to catch up to him and simply push him hard, right off balance. The suspect goes sprawling, out of control, down to the ground. The officer remains standing and in control, able to draw his baton or his gun. The evidence suggests that this simple tactic might have saved a number of lives. In real time, of course, it looks like this.
Put your hands where I can see them!
The study of officers killed handling prisoners also discovered that 24% of the officers were killed while handcuffing prisoners.
Sir, I'm going to put you under arrest for driving under the influence of alcohol. I'd like you to turn around and put your hands behind your back.
A case from a department in the West is a typical example of what the evidence suggests probably happened in a number of cases. Typically, the officer had just moved close to the suspect and started to handcuff or only got one cuff on when the suspect suddenly attacked. As you can see, the female officer in this case lost her weapon, and it's worth noting that weapon retention was identified as a significant problem for officers in the study. 43% of the officers were shot with their own weapon. All the evidence indicates that at the very least, safety holsters would have saved lives. By the way, though there are probably 100 good weapon retention techniques, a behavioral study of what officers actually do when under attack is worth remembering. When the suspect goes for the weapon, instinctively most officers try to pin his hand to the gun so he can't extract it. If the person is too strong and the officer needs two hands to keep him pinned, the officers try to twist and pull away. And if that doesn't work, it becomes a dance where the strongest wins. In the fear of the moment, many weapon retention techniques are forgotten. But the study found that surprisingly this one is often remembered. As many veteran officers already know, a good swift kick to the shins or ankles is extremely painful and very effective in disrupting the suspect's focus of concentration so you can pull away. It's worth remembering because it works. And of course, in real time, it looks like this.
I'm taking it! Oh! 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 Oh!
A case from the South is a good example of a couple of significant statistics that came out of the study of officers killed handling prisoners. First, 80% of the cases had one suspect only.
Get out of the car!
In this case, the officer realized he had found the vehicle associated with a robbery the previous day,
Turn around!
and probably the robber, too. He called for backup, but didn't wait.
Turn around and put your back towards me! Get on the ground!
As in similar cases, the evidence suggests that the officer believed he could handle a single prisoner as long as he was careful and used a handcuffing technique designed for dangerous suspects.
Put your left hand behind your back.
Unfortunately, he was wrong, because without backup, when he put his weapon away to handcuff the prisoner, he lost any advantage that he had and was now vulnerable to attack. The second significant statistic, of which this case is an example, is that also, unfortunately, this officer and 79% of the officers killed handling prisoners did not wear vests. He definitely should have.
Driver! Passenger! Put your hands up! Do it now! Driver, I want you to get out of the vehicle! Do it now! Don't turn back around at me!
In a small town in the Southwest, an officer had pulled over a car with two occupants who clearly matched the description of a couple who had just robbed a local store.
You know what you're doing here, man.
Get down on your knees. Do it now.
Like the officer in the previous case, he had called for a backup, but for some reason, he decided not to wait.
Passenger.
In a few seconds, he too was going to die. The study confirmed, and this case illustrates what experienced officers have always known. Handling prisoners alone increases the danger to a law enforcement officer. 64% of the officers killed were alone. Of those officers who did have backup, about one-half were attacked when the backup was somewhere else or had already departed. The evidence in this case indicates that because the officer was alone, the suspects appear to have made up a quick plan to take him if they could. When he reached to handcuff the male suspect, the suspect moved away, which caused the officer to instinctively grab for him instead of backing off and regaining control. That distraction, whether planned or not, was just enough for the female to get to a revolver. And by the time the officers saw what was happening, it was too late. This case is a good example of another finding of the study worth remembering. 42% of the prisoners who killed officers had concealed weapons. This percentage is so high that it is probably prudent to at first assume any person you arrest might have a gun. In a state fish and game department in the West, the officer knew the suspects had a gun because he had already taken it away from them and unloaded it before attempting to place them under arrest for poaching.
I want you guys to turn around. Perfect, turn around. Go ahead, turn around.
This officer had 6 years of experience, and the study found that it was the experienced officers who often had the most trouble, perhaps because they had made so many arrests during their careers that now they were no longer approaching an arrest situation with sufficient caution.
Go, John, go! Get the gun! Get the gun! Get it, John! Hang on to him, hang on! I got him! Let him go, kid! Push him away!
By the way, another reason experienced officers like this one had trouble with prisoners might be connected with these two findings from the study. First, 63% of the officers fought with their killers, and they lost. And second, most of the killers were younger than the officers. What this suggests, of course, is that the killers assessed that they could take on the older officer, perhaps because they knew they were stronger and in better shape. The findings do seem to imply that staying in good physical condition could one day be a factor in staying alive. One of the most surprising statistics to come out of the analysis of officers killed is this one. In the study, 49% of the officers are killed after the prisoner is in custody. For example, in this case in the Southwest, the officers were on their way out of the bar when a bystander got involved and got the officer's gun. Since incidents like this occurred a number of times in the study, it's certainly something to remain alert for, especially when people are angry or drunk.
Okay, go ahead and have a seat there.
And speaking of drunks, they were a significant factor in the study.
Okay, what we're going to be doing is giving you a toxicology test to determine the alcohol content of your blood.
Statistically, there was an indication of alcohol involvement in at least 27% of the cases. As you would expect, the study found individuals under the influence of alcohol either became combative and overpowered the officer or shot the officers in anger. In this case from the Northwest, the officers had already searched, handcuffed, and transported a drunk driver to a temporary intoxilizer trailer inside the jail compound. After taking the cuffs off again, the officers were occupied with getting the intoxilizer ready, and the suspect, well, he was just waiting. 46% of the killers in the study waited for an opportunity to attack. In this case, the officers not only gave the drunk an opportunity, they also gave him a weapon by doing a faulty search.
Put all your weight on your left foot for me and raise your right foot up off the ground.
See, she's
Okay.
doing it. She's doing it right.
Doing a sloppy body search of the person you're going to arrest is, of course, a serious mistake. But the study found that a much higher number of officers were killed because they didn't conduct any form of body search at all. 27% were killed due to a lack of search. In this case from the Southwest, the evidence suggests the officer altered his arrest procedure and decided not to search the drunk woman because of how it might look and the emotional reaction it might cause in the bystanders. There were a number of cases like this. If he had searched her, he might not have died. Or, if he had handcuffed her, he might not have died. 38% of the officers who were killed did not handcuff their prisoners. The evidence is strong that if they had, most would not have died. It's worth remembering that 17% of the officers were killed in the police car after the arrest. And in every case, it's because they didn't search or handcuff.
Nothing like this ever happened before, officers.
A significant percentage of the officers in the study were killed even after they got the prisoner to jail.
Might be able to make phone calls to my mom.
This case from the Midwest is a good example of what usually happened. And this last statistic from the study is a good reminder of one of the times of definite danger when handling prisoners. 21% of the killers attacked at the last possible chance.
Just one cigarette, officer.
You've seen a lot of statistics in this program, which were used to illustrate specific dangers identified from the past. But as every veteran officer knows, when all is said and done, basically it all comes down to this. The study simply confirmed it is important to always use caution when controlling prisoners.
I'd like you to step out of the van, please.
It is important to remember all foot pursuits are extremely dangerous. It is important not to assume everyone you attempt to handcuff is going to go along. It is important to always try to avoid handling prisoners alone.
Go, John, go!
It's important to always use tactics that prevent prisoners from getting any opportunity to attack. It's important to handcuff and search every prisoner you take into custody. And from the beginning of an arrest until the prisoner is behind bars and the door is closed and locked, it is important to remember every prisoner is always potentially dangerous.